And here's Denny, Mike, Paul, and Stefano for Love
Thank
My
you,
Tool
Tim.
TV.
Thank you, Tim. All right, so we're doing another episode of the LMTV Interop because Interop is next week, and today we have invited our very good friend, someone who we only see once a year. So when we see Mike Pennacchi, we know that Interop is on. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Danny. It's good to be here. I need to change that. If it's only once a year, I show up before Interop.
Yeah, well then we just means that we have to have more Interop.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was kind of disappointed to see that we're not doing New York anymore.
Yeah. Well, in addition, I have invited a very special guest, Stefano Gridelli.
Hi, Danny. Thank you for the special guest.
Who's been on the show before. He is one of the co-founder and the CEO of NetBeez, what used to be a tiny company but no longer, and is actually also not only a sponsor of Love My Tool but a participating vendor for the Interop Net at Interop Las Vegas. Welcome to the show, Stefano.
Thank you, Danny. Nice to be here.
And a note taker, Paul Offord. Paul Offord has got his legal pad already, his pencil all sharpened, and
I have pads here. I'm ready.
Denny, we forgot to tell Mike that anything he says can and will be held against him in all future conferences.
Yeah, and that's right, Mike. Our business model, Tim and I took years to work this out, is that the show is actually free, but any editing is going to cost you money.
Oh, to fix anything that I said?
All right, it's okay. Mike, so you're, as usual, and you've been doing this for almost 20 years now, but every year at Interop you teach. And this year you have at least 2 workshops that I know of that has very interesting title, and so obviously we want to hear about them, but more than that, I think that to say that the industry is in flux would be an understatement. There's a lot of turmoil out there, which means that there's a lot of pain points, but at the same time innovations, and I suspect that you organize your 2 workshops around the trends that you see. So we'd like to hear from your mouth what you think is going on out there.
Well, I think that we see that the industry's changed a lot, especially since I got into it. Like you said, I've been a part of Interop since 1995. I was an attendee in 95 and 96 and started teaching in 97. I've been the lead network engineer. I've been a provider for the Interop Net. I've held just about every position I think you could hold as far as being part of that show. And what I see as we're moving along is that the role of a network troubleshooter is still the same. And that's the answer to that question: the network is slow or an application is slow. But rarely do they ever say the application. It's the network. What we see as far as challenges that continue to arise is this the virtualization of resources has become a big issue when it comes to troubleshooting. I have things like vMotion, where I've got servers that can move from one platform to another. I've got the cloud, where I may not even have control of those resources that are providing my services, or a good portion of the network that gets to those resources. I've got, we're looking at SDN. We've got our software-defined networking, where our network could be dependent on what application is running. So this whole idea that the packet takes a consistent path becomes increasingly difficult and less of an occurrence out there. So from a troubleshooting standpoint, what tools and what methodologies can we implement that are going to help us get to the root of the problem? In addition, we tend to allow some of this network design to be pushed out with the idea of virtualization and so on, but not a lot of efforts put into how do we design a network that can be fixed. And I know that Tim is a huge proponent, as I think we all are, of things like taps and monitoring. So what consideration is being made for these technologies at the time we're designing the network? If I end up building a network that provides low cost of operation, but I can't troubleshoot it, in the end, I'm going to have these nagging recurring problems that occur. I won't be able to answer those. I will be having my credibility eaten away because as a IT department, I have problems out there I can't solve. So we can't just plug things in and expect them to work. We have to understand how they work, because when they do break, we need to understand what we need to monitor, where we need to monitor, and how to interpret the results of that monitoring.
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, Mike is speaking your language here, just with a slightly different accent.
Absolutely. No, definitely. I agree with everything Mike said. I think the challenges around cloud and even around infrastructure as a service and co-location. So many of these scenarios give us problems to troubleshooting, because if you're running an infrastructure as a service, you're probably running in a multi-tenant environment where you've got lots of customers running on common infrastructure, and of course there's a really big reluctance to allow anyone to capture data on shared infrastructure like that. So effectively you're being cut off from really valuable troubleshooting data. And I think I totally agree with the point Mike makes about not designing the network to be troubleshooting friendly, because that's becoming a big problem. I think it's really causing us a lot of problems.
Is it you think that's a cultural problem, or is it more of a budget problem?
I just don't think it's considered. I think it's very much an afterthought. I don't know that it actually forms part of the design brief. I mean, to be fair, I'm not really directly involved in network design, but observation from the outside, having to try and connect analyzers and that type of equipment to a network, it seems to me that there's very little thought given to actually how are we going to troubleshoot network problems after it's all installed.
I think there's more thought given to fire escape than it is to how to manage a multi-million-dollar, network. And I think Interop's theme this year is your network is your company. And
yeah,
if you're a $100 million company, someone says, "Well, what's your network worth?" It's $100 million to start with.
I don't know. You've noticed that Gartner have just released this report about the importance of wire data. I applaud them for doing it. It's a shame they didn't do it 15 years ago, but at least they've caught up now. So I hope that it's going to become more visible in the boardroom and certainly in senior IT management meetings.
Well, that's where it usually gets stopped down anyway.
It's amazing how many of the same issue we still discuss 15 years later. I mean, just tap, right? I mean, the other day Tony and Tim and I were kind of talking about what we should be talking about in the next show, and I said something about why beat the dead horse to death, but that's only because I'm not involved with the industry anymore. It turns out that people still don't understand why they need to tap. Right now, but Mike, but does that mean more business for you?
Well, yeah. I mean, well, here's what I found too, and that is last year I had a gentleman attend one of the classes that has been coming to my classes at Interop year after year after year, and he said he was kind of mad that I wasn't talking about something new. He said, why aren't you talking about the cutting edge things? And I said, here's what I found, and that is every year there is a new group of people coming into our industry, and they become network folks because they're interested in that, because they fall into that position, but they don't get a formal education in many cases on how does a packet traverse a network, how does switching work, how does routing work, and there is a huge demand out there for I hate to call it the basics, but it is the information we have to know. And I think as a group, we tend to take some of that for granted, that we understand how that works because we've been doing it for so long. But when I do the classes, the look I see on people's faces when they all of a sudden understand that's what's happening, that's what's going on. In fact, I joke that when I do a class, I need little red flags to put on somebody's desk because I'll answer their question. They'll come to class and they'll say, that is the reason I came, that is the one reason I came here. I didn't know it, but that answered the question. You can talk about anything else you want now, because I got that burning question answered I've had.
I remember back in the days when I was in graduate school and I had to take my oral qualifying exam, and I had invited, in addition to my chairman, I had to invite 5 other professors to be on my committee, and I failed miserably. And then afterwards, I thought at least I should go visit the professors and see what they have to say. And I walk into this professor's room, and he didn't want to see me. And finally, he says, "Not only did you not know, you didn't know that you didn't know."
Well,
I have never been more humiliated.
Yeah.
Is that that's Donald Rumsfeld saying,
What?
isn't it?
No. Rumsfeld, he said more, but yeah, but that's where he started. That's where he started. Yeah, but you were saying, Mike.
Well, it's the I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And where do I start? And that's a big one. And what I've learned over the years, and like in my I'm doing a class on structured problem analysis, or structured network troubleshooting. And in that case, and I hate to do it, but I go back to the OSI model. I don't hate to do it. I love it because it makes a great structure for troubleshooting. But going back to the OSI model and saying, how do we eliminate those things that are not part of the problem? I think back on a couple of years ago, I did a firewall analysis job, and I spent 3 hours explaining why it was not the firewall. And as soon as we hung up, the guy I was working with said that the CEO said, I still think it's a firewall. So I spent 3 hours presenting hard facts, latencies, packet loss, connection setup, teardown. And here's somebody that had no technical knowledge about what was going on that still insisted it was a firewall because they felt that was what the problem was. So, it's going through and very carefully looking at how do we quickly eliminate those parts of the problem. If I do a throughput test and I get full line rate, it's probably not physical layer errors. It's probably not TCP window size problems. But if I do, I can't jump up to the application layer. I need to move back down and find out what's going on with those lower layers. The other part is sticking with that too often we skip over things that are important. And we see that people that are pilots go through a checklist, and they could say, obviously, this is okay. But if they don't go through that checklist every time, it's too easy to skip over those obvious things. So that's why, as we're putting in this fiber, we're putting in some fiber optic, we're going to go back through and test every one of those and make sure that every single one of those fibers is clean. I've got a box of 60 brand new patch cords. I can guarantee you, if we don't inspect those things, there's dirt on there, even though they're new from the factory. So there's all of these assumptions people make, and it's those assumptions about how things are supposed to work, what they were told about that piece of equipment, that end up burning them many times in the end.
Hey, Mike, I hate to put it as a generational gap thing, but is it really? There's something missing in the newer generation of technicians, of engineers. They don't tend to know how to kind of peel like I think Paul said once, you kind of have to peel the onion, right? You kind of you look at the problem, and rather than they tend to. I seen young people want to make problem more complicated, as opposed to just take the problem and making it simple and solve it in the basic level. I hate to put it that way, but I think there is a little bit of that, right?
Well, part of it is problem-solving skills, right? Whether it applies to networking or anything else. The other part is data. And, Stefano with NetBeez, being able to go in and collect information about, what website response time is. Where do we see can we triangulate? Is everybody seeing slowdowns? Is just one part of it seeing slowdowns? Is the slowdown the TCP connection time, or is it the website response time? Is it name resolution time? What Paul's done with developing different tools that work in with Wireshark and his book, really going in and taking a look at how do we break this down? How do we collect the right data? With Wireshark, I've got a lot of tools I'm talking about with the killer tool set. Wireshark, I'm having to really back off how much I dig in there. But I'll tell you what, I had the opportunity a couple of years ago. I was at Interop, and I noticed that someone was doing a Wireshark class, but it wasn't me, and I've always done the Wireshark class there. And it was Laura. And I went into the class, and the first thing she said is, well, Mike Pennacchi normally does this class, but he couldn't be here. It's like, well, I'm here. I'm in the front row. But I got to say, the two things I took out of that class, and it was really nice to be an attendee, is we tend to spend a lot of our time up teaching and talking about this. Every once in a while, it's nice to sit back and listen to somebody else that's an expert talk about it. The save filter button, one of those things that's easy to gloss over with Wireshark, but creating repeatable filters, and the TCP analysis flags filter. So just going in and saying, did we see any TCP problems? If there's one thing that I could get across to people when it comes to using Wireshark, is create that filter. And if you click on that and you don't see any duplicate acknowledgments, any retransmissions, that's a pretty good indicator that we're getting data across the network successfully. Now we still have to capture. How do we know we captured all the packets? There's a lot of pieces that go in with that. But it is people. A lot of the network administrators we see out there have a lot of demands on their time. I've got an organization that I work with here in Seattle that all I do is go in and fix their problems because their guys are so busy working on projects and working on political problems. Making sure that they're in the meeting to understand, how this works. I joke I have a meeting rate and an analysis rate. And my meeting rate is 3 times my analysis rate. If you want me to sit in a meeting and have to just sit there and not do anything, I got to charge you more because it's killing me. I hate that.
Well, this is kind of similar, and I think Stefano might be able to relate to that. This is kind of similar to my experience as an entrepreneur, right? When you have like single-digit employees in the company, you can't afford activities. You got to know the difference between activity and action. Mm-hmm. And I think that's I suspect that as a network troubleshooter, that's the distinction you have to make day in and day out, right?
Yeah. In our case, for example, we mostly hand off the tool NetBeez to our customers, and then basically they take it from there. So on our end, we don't spend too much time troubleshooting problems for our customers, right? Because we basically sell this service, but it's in the end almost a software. But we might work with our customers if they have specific issues that they're not, they have problems troubleshooting them. So we spend some time with them and review their data and help them figure out, pinpoint the root cause. Because sometimes they have like large networks, a lot of like complexity. That means number of components that could be introducing the performance degradation, or also virtualization, as Mike was saying. So it's really difficult to sometimes peel the layers of the onion and spot the root cause, I would say, of the problem. So yeah, on that we have to be very efficient, and we tend to basically take tickets where we see really like where the help is needed from us to jump on the call with them and maybe analyze their dashboard and their data. Mm-hmm. But for the most, the beauty is that we end up like the dashboard, and they're able to troubleshoot most of the problem by themselves, because we tell them, is this a network or a site-specific issue, or is this an application issue? So for the most of the troubleshooting, they're able to do it with their own basically hands.
Yeah, and I was going to comment on Mike's comment, and I'm sure Paul feels the same way. I'd rather spend time in the dark room working on the network than spending time sitting in a board meeting trying to convince an executive what the problem is who has no experience. But being an instructor too here, I have found that a lot of the people that move into networking, they don't have, BSEEs. I've had many people even argue with me, why is there a limit on the length of a cable? And you try to explain to them what inductance is, what capacitance is, what noise is, what roll off is and all this. And a lot of the basic stuff is not there. I don't think they teach it in colleges like they should, especially networking. My gosh, there's so many fundamentals you have to have. And, you know, here you are, one day you're blessed, go out and solve the world's problems. And they enter a world that they don't have any understanding of fundamentally.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I tell you what, I've got a more cynical view than that, really. I
Try to be nice, Paul.
No, I think that IT departments are getting the sorts of people they think they want. I think they want people who can perform tasks efficiently. They can configure switches, they can configure routers, but that doesn't necessarily mean they understand the fundamentals. So I've found that I've interviewed people for a job with us, and I'd perhaps get in a really experienced network engineer, and I draw a diagram on the whiteboard, and I say, tell me how the packet gets from one end to the other, and you want to hear some of the answers I get. I mean, it's just incredible. And but the thing is, to be fair to them, that sort of fundamental issue very rarely arises in their day-to-day work, because they're busy knowing how to drive the Cisco command line or whatever. I don't know, but you know, they're configuring stuff. The problem is going to come, and it's coming really quickly now. I was watching a Riverbed webinar this afternoon, showing how they've come up with this very graphical, very high-level way of deploying network configuration. And quite honestly, it's going to put a lot of network engineers out of work. So if they want to maintain a job, they better start to think about fundamentals and how to troubleshoot problems, because otherwise I'm not sure what their purpose is going to be.
Well, we have just a few more minutes if we want to make the 30-minute mark, not make this show too long. Mike, I want to come back to the two workshops that you're giving at Interop, and particularly I want to address the network engineers that Paul just mentioned, and if they haven't made plans to come to Interop Las Vegas, or if they have made plans but haven't made plans to come to your workshop, what would they be learning from you?
Well, in the tools portion of it, what we're going to do, and I don't expect anyone to be able to read this, but I mean, I've got a pretty good little list of tools here. Even got a coffee stain on there while I've been working on it, that we're going to talk about, because one of the issues that we run into is that people give the excuse, I can't afford the tools, right? That's an easy one. That's like saying my dad won't let me come over and play. Maybe you don't want to, but by saying I can't afford it, we have a significant list of tools. And I mean, I was showing Tim, where is it? I've got my little Raspberry Pi with my LCD screen on there that I soldered together. The tools that we can load on even a little Linux device like this that gives us a view into what's going on with our network is amazing. And these tools don't cost anything. But what that does is that removes that excuse. So my goal is twofold with that class. One is, let's take a look at what tools are available. I've filtered it down. I've tested these different tools out. These are tools you can go out and download and start using immediately. And then how do we use those? And I find a big barrier to entry for a lot of people is they say, well, I don't know Linux. Look, 4 years ago, I swore I would never use Linux. And now I'm writing Python programs and I'm writing shell scripts because I found out you just can't avoid it, right? The structured approach to network troubleshooting. Where do we start and what path do we take? And this is not, I can't give you everything you need to know, but what I can do is I can tell you, if I'm going to go in and troubleshoot an intermittent problem, then I can set up a ring buffer on a Wireshark capture. I can capture to disk, and I can show you how we can put an icon on your desktop, and when someone has the problem, they click on that icon, and they put a marker in that trace file. And with that marker, we can then go back, because you can't I hate to say it, you can't trust anything anyone says. If you say, call me when the problem happens, they'll call you, and they'll say the problem happened last week at 2 o'clock. And you may not have that data anymore. So there's the tools out there. We have the methods of going in and doing those captures. We have the ways to step-by-step eliminate some of those problems. So the two classes I'm doing, are to provide some of the methods and processes for going in and troubleshooting problems, and some of the tools that are available out there at little to really no cost other than a small time investment. And if people are interested, last year I did a monthly webcast series. I needed to start doing it again this year. I went through most of those tools, spent an hour each month. I'll send them the links to the videos that I did on those. But there it is how do we use these, and how do we remove that excuse of money and tools? Because now
and methods.
And methods. And so what do the paid for tools get us? It's faster, it gets us to the root of the problem. But if I need to understand where time, name resolution, TCP connection, time to first byte, things like that come in, it doesn't matter whether I'm using a tool I paid for or I'm using curl to go in and measure that myself. What it does matter is that I understand why those numbers are important to me. And then at that point, I understand why I would spend the money on a tool. So then when I go out and buy something, I'm buying it for the right reasons. Right. One other thing I got to inject here, and that is, I work with a lot of these different tool manufacturers. And the thing that they sell the tools on is, this is so easy, you don't need any training, it'll just fix the problems for you. And then people come back and they go, yeah, I bought the tool and I plugged it in and it's showing me all these problems, but I don't know what's causing those. And then they go back and they say, well, maybe you do need training. So I say, hey, let's just be honest. This tool is going to make it faster, but if you don't understand what it is you're looking for, it's only going to point out what you don't know faster.
Right.
So,
well, that was
it's kind of like saying online dating solve your sex life. I mean, improve your sex life. It doesn't. You still have to do the work.
Take your word for it, Danny.
I can see Danny on tonight's show, right? I mean,
I try it. It doesn't do crap.
Yeah. I was going to say, Mike, you're absolutely right on that. And just recently, a friend of mine called me and said, I bought this really cool product. I said, yeah. And he says, it shows me all this stuff. And I said, yeah. And he says, the only problem is I bought it to answer questions, not to ask me questions.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, because half of my time's network troubleshooting. The other, I'm spending more and more time doing copper and fiber certification training and along that. So now when we get into that, what standard are you following? What type of cable are you using? So it asks a lot of questions. And we can't just plug something in and expect it just to find out what's going on. It's like plugging some of this discovery equipment in and having people say, well, what do you mean it can't map out my network? Well, you don't have SNMP turned on, or you have all unmanaged switches. Well, there's something that we needed to plan for a long time before we started trying to automatically map the network.
It's amazing, Mike. You just said something. This is 2016, right? Back in 1994, I was in a conference with Vint, and we were talking about stuff, and someone says, well, what do you like about standards? And I said, I love standards. There's so many of them, we could choose which one we want to comply with, and today, that's even more relevant, because if you don't like the standard that you're being held to, go choose another one. But learning how to diagnose something, take something from the root, even the most fundamental things.
Yep.
That's why I like NetBeez, because it's so simple. I mean, it just lays it on the plate for you, but you still have to understand that there's a problem and go look at it and try to solve it. But it tells you got a problem a lot simpler. But that's always been the problem. Paul, you've experienced that a million times. Stefano, I know you have, and I know in networking I have, is I don't care what tool you got to have the ability to understand what it's doing and what it's not doing.
I do agree. Like in our case, like Mike was saying, first you have to detect the problem, and sometimes you have to work with the user to let you know, hey, because they, as Mike said, they will not let you know when it's happening, and they will let you know after, like, hey, yesterday was not working. So that's exactly the type of job that we felt like we needed to do, right? So we tell you exactly when the problem is starting and how sporadic it is. And then you drill down with like Mike tools, for example, or packet capture to analyze, is it, you know, the TCP connection time, is it the application or the network? So the first detection was very important for us, and that's why it's kind of evidence troubleshooting. When you go to a CEO and he says, no, I think it's the firewall, or my speed test is terrible, that's when you need the data that we provide to tell you, hey, I have the data that backs my statement. So it's almost an insurance, right?
Yeah.
When you have the data, bottom line.
So guys, I think we should close the show. There is something magical about 30 minutes, and so we're slightly over that. So Stefano, I understand that we're going to be doing something next week while you're on the show floor, right? I look forward to that.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, so we're gonna reserve that, and we'll get more update on the company and the product that the progress of your company and so forth. Is that okay? We do that next week?
Absolutely, and we also holding ourselves a class on tips and tricks on troubleshooting. But yeah, we can basically do an hangout from Interop, live from the Mandalay Bay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's in any case, it was really good seeing you again. So
Same here.
we'll see you next week. So
Stefano,
Paul,
I'll see you next week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, see you on the floor.
So Paul, I'll give you a chance to close, and then we'll let Mike have the last word.
Well, I think Mike has raised some really important points. You know, you're talking about a man with years and years of experience. I think we've got to listen to what he says. I just think I don't see it getting any simpler. I think the challenges are going to grow, and we have to start to get to grips with some of this stuff because, as we all know, it's always blamed on the network. So we need to find a way to deal with that issue.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Hey, for some reason we haven't done an LMTV review yet recently, or this year even. So we need to catch up on that.
With me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Was that definitive enough, Paul?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So Mike, so you have a busy week next week, and
I do, and let me just I got to put in a plug for our protocol analysis and troubleshooting group on LinkedIn. Paul is a huge contributor to that, as well as Tony Fortunato. We've got 8,300 members out there. Great place to come and submit questions and so on. If you have any questions, if you have any cool things you found with networking. I got to say, Denny, is one last thing. We've all been, most of us been around long enough. I had to worry about things like token ring timers. I had to worry about standing waves on thick Ethernet because you could only drill the holes in so many places. So, there's things that we had to worry about back in the day that we had to know how those technologies worked. Because when they brought Ethernet in, why is the cable this long? How could we get away with those things? And as the years have gone by, things have become more standard. And we don't have some of those issues. I was the only guy that could point out what an IBM 8228 Mao reset tool was. Somebody had a whole pile of stuff, and they said, I bet you can't guess what all this is. And I said, that is a 8228 Mao reset tool. Oh, how'd you know that? Because I use those things. Because you could go in and you could hear those relays, click, 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 click. So sometimes, I find, you look at Tony, you look at me, you look at Ray Tompkins, Paul, and we've been around so long that we had to know those things. Tim was soldering some of those things together in his basement there. So I think that our generation had to know how those things worked because they were all new. And with the standardization, there's been some, people have become removed from the nuts and bolts of how they work.
Well, thank you for the inspiration, Mike. So you give me an idea. I think we're doing this all wrong, Tim. We shouldn't be doing video teleconferencing like this. We should be doing a radio show
Why not?
We get all the old folks together, you know, and we're not getting recruited anyway. So.
Well,
Thanks,
pretty
Mike, for
soon they'd
mentioning
probably
how
ask
old
if
we were too. By the way, I appreciate that.
No,
I think if Tim
I
gets
think-
any uglier, it probably should do a radio show.
Well,
Thanks,
that's-
Mike.
that's-
Appreciate it. Love you too. By the way, Mike, you remember that article that everybody wanted you to write article number 2
Yes.
about 2 years ago?
Yeah.
That's your zap for the day.
Okay. Yeah.
You owe me that.
I do owe you that.
I'm just picking on. Hey, I want to say one thing. Paul, you said it. We've all said it. But it's great to have people like Paul and like Mike and that are out there that are independents that are willing to, teach us stuff and help teach stuff that Denny and I used to call it empiricism, right? When Mom told you not to touch the stove and then finally you did and found out that it burnt. That's empirical knowledge. And unfortunately, a lot of us came from a theoretical background and had to go through the empirical school of education, of hard knocks, as it were, and or OJT, as some people call it. But thank God we've got people like that. We got people like Stefano and their company that take some of this very complex stuff and put it in a usable format. So keep teaching, Mike and Paul and Stefano. Keep troubleshooting, and eventually we'll get enough people trained to be dangerous.
Okay, well, with that, speaking for a bunch of grandfathers.
Not yet. Let's hope not.
All right, so we'll thanks again, everyone, and we'll have a bunch of shows coming up next week for Interop, and we look forward to seeing all of you. Have fun, Mike, at Las Vegas. See you soon, Paul. And Stefano, you got a lot of work to do next
Yeah,
year.
absolutely. Thank you, Danny.
So get some sleep now, and you're gonna need it. And Tim, you and I, we're always gonna be here. we're definitely like the grandfathers. We're very good in giving out advices, but not so good in changing diapers. Okay.
Long time ago, yeah. Be
All
safe,
right.
everybody.
Okay, be safe, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.